Welcome to Podcast, the Business of Dentistry podcast, brought to you by Practice Plan. Podcast delivers the best business advice, real-life stories, and practical hints and tips to make your practice a more profitable and sustainable business. And now, here's your host.
Hello and welcome to today's podcast. My name's Katrina James. I'm one of the area managers here at Practice Plan. I'm joined today by the very lovely Lucie Simic, who is a communication specialist and, of course, a wonderful dental consultant. Lucie, thanks so much for joining me again to talk through another hot topic.
Thanks, Kat. As always, a pleasure.
So today, I know you've obviously spent a lot of time working in dental practice, and I'm sure you've seen quite a few things during your time whilst in practice yourself and out visiting. But what I'd really like to talk to you today is all about the culture within a dental practice and what exactly would make a successful dental practice and a successful culture within that dental practice. So talk me through your experiences and thoughts, Lucie, about what you feel really defines a good culture within a dental practice.
Absolutely. So culture is, everyone has one. So your dental practice has a culture, whether you have cultivated it or not. And I think that's the first thing that's really important here is that if you're wandering around going, yeah, no, I haven't really got to the culture bit yet. I'll get to that and I'll create it. You've got a culture. It just won't be the culture necessarily that you want. And I think often when we haven't purposefully defined what that culture is and thought about it and spoken about it with our team members, the culture becomes a little bit like the mass. So it becomes about the people. And that is great when you've cultivated it because that's what happens. But when you don't do anything with it, it can become really unwielding and often it becomes the issue. So if you've got a problem with retention of staff, if you have a problem with recruiting people into your team, if you have a problem with maybe the feeling in the practice, and this is what's strange about it, is culture is very much part of that limbic brain. It's the feel.
Yes,
it's defining why you feel a particular way. You know, I am an Apple lover. I have an Apple iPhone. I have an Apple computer. I love Apple. Now, Apple are the company that they are because they go, we are this, and we're going to make you feel something. And so I want to be part of their gang. And that's what we have to do. We have to create that feeling. It's the untold bit. It's the bit that you can't really tangibly kind of talk about, but you go, this is the culture and I'm going to drive it forward.
Brilliant. Yeah, and you're spot on there. It's definitely a feel.
It is.
And quite often when I visit a practice, I get a feel myself after a few minutes of being in there as to what that culture is.
Which is fascinating, isn't it? Because obviously I have the same thing and I walk in and you can pick up very quickly.
Yeah.
Now, for a moment, just remember your patient also feels it. Because a lot of the time I get this conversation from dentists where they say, yeah, but, you know, I don't care about the culture, or, you know, yes, I'll get to it. But actually it has such an important role in what you do as a dental practice. And it's what it's how you define yourself as a practice, because patients are the same as your team. They feel it. They walk in. If I think about any business that I go into now, and there is a feeling of, I don't really want to spend my money here because I don't like the culture, or I don't like how I behaved. Last night went out for a meal and I'll call it for what it is, TGI Fridays. We went to TGI Fridays. I worked at TGI Fridays in my sixth form days. So as a 16, 17, nearly 18-year-old girl, I was working in TGI Fridays and it was a buzz. We were a gang. We came out in our stripes. We sang happy birthday to people. There was a real feeling. And I walked in there last night and I haven't been back for quite some time. And obviously a lot of that culture has died. The TGI Fridays feeling was, we're hard rock, but on the high street. That was kind of how it felt. It felt like you went and you got an experience. That's not the case. You go in now and everything's dumbed down. It's very different. It doesn't have that same feeling. And that's what I describe when I talk about culture. So, think about that with your team. You can use real life experiences. What do you think about the culture of this business? What do you think about the culture of that business? And talk about it actively with them and define what your culture is.
And that is so important because quite often people just don't know. They only know what they see or how people behave.
Absolutely.
So thinking about this, what is the role of the leadership team within your practice then? How are they going to define this culture?
So the first thing is that they have to define and pinpoint what that might be. So they have to think about, what is the culture? Because if I go into a dental practice and I say to people who work there, what do you think we're here to do? And most times they'll say, we're here to see patients, look after patients, we're here to make money. So those will be the two things. Now, if I think about any experience that I've ever kind of come across culture-wise, those two are really important, but they are not the single reason I'm doing what I'm doing. The military is a great example. So my dad was in the military. I've had a lot of kind of experience under military leadership. And it is a thing that you live and you breathe. So much so that often people join the military and they come out and they have a tattoo.
Yes.
Because that's how much it means to them. They have lived and breathed a culture to the point where they want it to be defined on themselves, a marker of something they've been involved in and something they've been a part of.
Almost branded.
Branded,
Yeah.
absolutely. And they want to be, and the same goes for your dental practice. They want to be part of something bigger.
Yeah.
Something that is going to take them somewhere, something that they feel so passionately about. And you can't be passionate about simply making money and looking after people.
No.
It's part of it and it draws it in, but it's more than that. So the leadership has to define what that thing is. We have to set the course.
So what characteristics do good leaders need to have to be able to drive that inclusiveness and steer people along the vision that they've got and create that culture and environment?
That's a great question, because quite often you've got a very varying range of practice owners, leading from people who are very good at the leadership to people who are a bit more kind of like, I like being a clinical dentist and I just want to have my head in a mouth, which is absolutely great, and I get it. So what they have to do is they have to be somebody who listens and they have to be somebody who questions. So we need to find out what it is. And I think that if you are a really clinical dentist and you have a great leadership around you, and by that I mean a great business manager or practice manager, somebody who's there, and a leadership level in your practice. So you work with a head nurse, you work with a lead receptionist, you work with a compliance manager, and anyone else, the practice plan family, they can help as well. But it's really important that together you sit down and you say, guys, what do you feel the culture is?
Yeah.
And we go through stuff, and there are exercises you can do to really define what it is. And you can talk about what you like and what you don't like. And then together you go out and you say, this is what we do.
Yeah.
This is who we are. We are going to be a dental practice that works really hard to be sustainable, to be approachable, to be family-centered, to be patient-centered. It might be that you turn around and they say, we're going to be really high end, we're going to be luxury, and we're going to be really members only club. Absolutely cool. What you can't be is beige. You can't be that middle ground.
No.
You have to work really hard to define who you are. Are we, bright? Are we fun? Are we serious? Are we, high end luxury? Whatever it might be, you have to be Marmite.
I love what you said about that. Have a chat with your team and ask them about what they think it is, because you're instantly engaging them, getting them on the journey with you, but also you're getting them involved in the idea, so their buy-in is there, isn't it? They've already got one foot into it before you start. I feel like a part of something from the get-go.
Absolutely, and it's the most important feedback you will get. So we ask for feedback from our patients all the time. We'll put out a Google review advert, or we'll ask them at the desk, how was everything for you today? But really, how often do we ask our team these questions about the business? How do you think it is? What would you do differently? How do you think, it felt when you first joined us? And often their feedback is really enlightening. They will tell you quite clearly what your culture is if you listen to them properly. And that sometimes is good, and sometimes they've got negative in there. If they came into me and they said, I think our culture is really unfriendly and really this and really that, I've got to listen to that, and I need to work really hard to adapt it. Okay, so we haven't got a particularly team approach to this. How are we going to make that better? What can we do? Actually, we're a young team, so does that look like team building? We're a slightly more mature team. Does that look like a slightly different kind of thing? And working with what you have to develop that going forward.
That's so important as well, is who you have and what you have, and develop it going forward. And what sits nicely with that is progression, succession planning, growth internally for the team, and that's all part of the culture, because
Yeah,
a happy team is a productive team. We all know this, don't we? You know, the happier you
absolutely.
are, win-win
Yeah.
for everybody. How do you look at nurturing development from within your team, and
Yeah.
encouraging that internal growth?
So I think your vibe attracts your tribe. Has never been truer. And I honestly believe the stronger the culture, the easier that is, because we lay out this thing where we say, one of the things that's really important for me is practice team members flourishing, doing really well in your practice. And often we're a little bit scared for them to do well because we worry that that means they're going to fly the nest.
Yes.
And as somebody who is on the cusp of her children doing exactly that, I even cried the other day at school when we were talking about university. And that just goes to show, we all go through a change. That doesn't mean they're not going to come back, or that they're not going to do wonderful things, or that just because I've built them up to be these incredible human beings, that isn't great as well. And I think we need to be less worried about the investment cost of people into our people in our practice, and fearing they're going to disappear as a result of them doing that, and actually engage with, I would rather have 5 happy years than 50 miserable years.
Yeah,
That sense that I
absolutely.
say, if I get the very best out of that person for 5 years, that's brilliant. Well
5
done, me.
fruitful,
100%.
productive years with an individual.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know recruitment and retention is a massive issue within the industry. I think everybody's aware of that. But how does this culture and this progression and everything contribute to employee satisfaction and retention?
It's huge. And I think that when we look around, it's not the person who's shouting the loudest, but it is the practice that really genuinely means it, that lives and breathes, that has that I love what I do feel.
Yeah.
They're the ones that don't have a problem. Now, that's not to say that there's a wider issue. There is. We are very much in a generation where things are changing. We have got to embrace that change. We have got to be forward thinking. We've got to be right there going, actually, people don't want to work in a dental practice 9 to 5, 5 days a week in the way that they did.
Yeah.
And the sooner we just drop that kind of mantra, the better it will be for everybody. But from a kind of wider angle, if I spoke to anybody in any industry at the moment, they're also struggling with similar issues. So
Yeah.
it isn't a dentistry only thing, but a bit like Blockbuster, I've got to embrace Netflix coming along, and as dentists and dental practice owners, we have got to start changing things, because I don't want to be left behind as other industries jump on board and go, do you know what? It's all about the culture. It's all about the people. There are lots of people at the moment who are talking about culture, about certain roles. You take Simon Sinek, there's a huge piece around that, and he's been saying it for a long time.
Yes.
More recently, Stephen Bartlett talking about things like having somebody who's in charge of happiness in the workplace. Roles that I would never, ever have dreamt of. But if he's doing it, we can do it too.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the bit where we go, it isn't for us, we're in dentistry, so this is how it works for us. And that mindset of, no.
The old saying is, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always got. So
and
we
the
do need to-
definition of madness is to repeat that, isn't it? It is that thing. And the insanity moment is keep doing what you've always done and
Yeah.
expecting a different result.
Yeah.
It's insane. So we
Absolutely.
have got to lead from the front, actually. What we are really good at in dentistry, and dentists are excellent at doing this, is going out seeking help, asking for help, looking for information, reading around subjects, learning. So embrace this new bit and make a change in your practice.
Implement it.
Absolutely. Go out and do it. And if you can't do it, go out and get somebody who can help you to do it.
Yeah. I mean, we've spoken a lot about culture and, great environments and development, but there will always be issues.
Always.
There will always be conflicts. There will always be challenges that we have to deal with at practice level, whether that's within the team or, patients or whatever it is. But within the team, you still have to deal with these issues. You can't not address them because they just turn into something much, much bigger, and it causes another problem for everybody else.
Yeah.
But how do you do that and continue to maintain this positive culture that you've worked hard to build?
So once you've got the culture and it's defined, it's much easier to do that. And that's the kind of key reason for doing it. Because once you realise that people align with your culture, those that fall out of that line are much easier for everybody to spot. And so you're much more likely to be able to adapt and think, do you know what? This isn't working. In the same way that it actually happens for patients as well. They get what you are and they go, yeah, you know what? I want to spend this with this business because I get something extra. Whereas you can also choose something completely different in a completely different environment, a completely different culture. So the culture kind of leads with it. Now, like you said, that doesn't mean that that's easy or that it disappears. It isn't a magic fix. But what it is one that is far easier for you in practice to work with when you define that culture. So when you're making decisions about whether a staff member is having a problem, you can actually put the business on the chair, the culture on the chair, and say, is that part of the culture? Do I need to adapt the culture? Have I hit a kind of a hole in our culture? Or actually, is it just that this person isn't the right fit for this culture?
Yes.
And we need to make a change in that respect. So by living those mantras, by breathing them, you make the decision far easier for every staff member.
Yeah. And that again drives the right message, doesn't
does.
it? Because if people see you putting up with things, that's driving a completely different message for the rest of the team, and it's demoralizing, isn't it?
And I want them to be saying the culture to themselves. I want them to walk around and for it to be a mantra. I want them to be branded with it, so much so that they live and breathe it. They go, oh, that isn't the culture of this practice, and they all see it, and so everybody falls into it. And then what should happen and what can happen is that the person who isn't in line with it makes the decision themselves and steps away and says, do you know what? This isn't quite where I'm at.
Yes.
If I decide to shop with a particular shop and I really don't like the number of emails that I've got coming through, the number of alerts, I've got a sale on this, I've got a sale on that, I choose as a customer to step away from it. And I go, do you know what? It's not really for me. Thank you very much. And that's what culture does for your patients, but for your team as well.
Fabulous. Lucie, any final words of wisdom for anybody out there who's listening and thinks, this is something I need to really get behind in my practice a little bit more?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
It starts with the team. Have a conversation with your team. Ask them to define your culture. And that's really easy. You can do it in a practice meeting. It doesn't have to be long-winded. It can just be a conversational kind of piece. Think about cultures that you like, and think about experiences that you have with businesses and talk about them. The first place this starts with is communication. It starts with talking about it. Talk about it with your practice manager. Talk about it with your leaders in your business. Talk about it with your staff. Find out from them what's going on the ground and then make a change.
Fabulous. Lucie, thank you very much for your time once again today. As always, fascinating. You are just a fountain of knowledge and you've always got such great information to share with everybody. Thanks very much again.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me.
See you soon.